Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show. Today we're going to be talking about IDP edges and who's going to repeat in the top 24 and who's going to fall out of the top 24. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. All righty, welcome. I am your host, Ricky Rodriguez. You can find me at RickyRod66 on X. And I'm joined once again this week by the IDP mind of Sean Teague, who you can find on X at Sean8386. Thrilled to have Sean here today to talk about IDP Edge, which in true position is edge slash defensive end slash outside linebacker. And we're going to talk about those top 24 repeaters and top 24, who's going to fall out of it. Last week, if you missed it, we did interior defensive line slash defensive tackles. Go back and look on this YouTube IDP Plus channel or on Spotify. You can go back and listen to that or watch that if you missed it. And we will continue on with all the defensive positions, and then we'll move to offense as well. All righty. Let's begin by taking a look at, and we shared this last week, and we focus on DTIDL, but want to start off with what is the average over the approximately last 10 years of repeat rates of the top 12 and the top 24 at the position, specifically edge this week. As you can see, and I know it's shocking when you think about all the studs that play edge, that only 4 of the top 12 repeat year over year in the top 12. And in the top 24, only 11 of the top 24 repeat. Now, Sean, I believe you did some digging and some research looking at the Kings Classic scoring system, which we talked about last week that we're using for this exercise here. And I believe you told me that you had some interesting facts related to these numbers. So what did you learn, Sean?
I learned that these numbers still speak true today. Over the last 2 years, each year it was exactly 11 repeaters from 22 to 23, 11 repeaters in the top 24. Same thing from 23 to 24. So this data is holding true. As far as the top 12, it's right there with it, 5 and 6, I think, over the last 2 years. Interestingly, not as many injuries took out some of the top guys in this compared to the defensive tackles, interior defensive linemen last week.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it was about 6 of the 13, I think, for defensive tackles. And here, it was more along the lines of 3, 4. So a little less. Some of these were just crazy bad seasons for some guys.
Yeah. Now, some people like to point out the fact, coming out of the show last week, well, you can't predict injuries. To a certain degree, you can't, but at a certain degree, some people are consistent in terms of the number of games they miss, or sometimes age starts factoring in, et cetera. And so, but good to hear that on the edge side of things, that this wasn't necessarily injury driven in terms of the number of people that are falling out. So that adds more fuel to the fire about why we're doing this discussion, why we're covering it for our listening audience and watching audience. So that, once again, I love to quote Bob Harris, the football diehard, in this: we're trying to draft the best team for this year, for 2025, not for last year, 2024. So I'll quickly share on the screen here, and people can take a look at the scoring system. I've got a black box around the edge slash defensive end slash outside linebackers, so you can see the scoring system. Once again, the Kings Classic scoring system is designed to try and have roughly 50 offensive and 50 defensive players in the top 100 overall. So that's why the scoring system is like it is. And while I know scoring systems are different, once again, this is the thought process and the mindset of not always assuming everything will go well and everything will do better, but what can go wrong? And the numbers say stuff will go wrong and people will fall out. And using that as you're setting your draft boards. You may agree with Sean, you may agree with me, you may agree with both of us, you may disagree with all of it, but we want to get you thinking ahead. Okay, and that is our goal. All righty, so I just pulled up on the screen here the top 24 from last year. And for those that might be only in listen mode, I hate to read all 24 names because that'll get boring really fast. So I won't do that. So I encourage you to come. You can check online, and we'll be talking about many of these. But you can come to the YouTube channel and take a quick look at the screenshots. Throughout the show, you can kind of jump around and see it. But once again, of the top 12, only 4 repeat. Of the top 24, only 11 repeat. Sean, when you first looked at this list, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of good names on this list. What were you thinking when I said, okay, you got to pull 13 out of here, Sean?
Yeah, I immediately panicked. There's a lot of good names on there. There really is. It came down to splitting some hairs and trying to look forward at strength of schedules for some of these guys, and just trying to factor in some injuries, not necessarily to these guys, but to some of the teammates around them. So it's a great exercise. I've actually really enjoyed this. It's got me thinking a lot more. I hope it does the same for everybody else here.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you, Sean. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move into the who do we think is going to fall out. But before we do, I just got to do a quick promo for the Fast Draft app. It's a first time deposit, folks, up to $50 match. You put in $50, they will match it $50. You put in 25, they will match it up to 25. All you have to do is put in the promo code plus, as in IDP plus. So PLUS gets you up to a $50 match on the Fast Draft app. They do have IDP only drafts, and the whole idea is these are fast. And there's some creativity around the scoring systems and 2x and 1.5x for different players and so forth. So I encourage you to check it out. It is the latest, and it is a whole lot of fun. All righty. With that, then, let's now, as I promised, move and look at the top 24 of who we think will be falling out. And for those that are looking on the screen, if it's in red, that means both Sean and I agreed that they are not likely to repeat. If it's in purple, Ricky only thought this person wouldn't repeat. And if it's in blue, Sean thought the person wouldn't repeat. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. So right off the top, Sean, the number one scorer last year was Andrew Van Ginkel. And I know I didn't put him on the list to talk about, but since he's number one on the list, let's go ahead and talk about him. So, what was your thinking in terms of pulling Andrew Van Ginkel off of the list?
He had a career year last year. He is familiar with Blind Flores' system, coming over from Miami as well. But looking at his career as a whole, this was the first time he's ever had double-digit sacks. It was career high in tackles. Some of the bonus turnover plays, things you can't really count on year to year. Plus, there's some rotation interest here with Mr. Dallas Turner maybe eating into Van Ginkel's snap share here. Even though he did sign the big contract, he kind of earned that last year. I just don't see his production holding up again this year. A lot of mouths to feed there all of a sudden this year.
Yeah, you're spot on. All those things you just brought up, I agree with. And there's one other thing. Occasionally, he was being moved like to that. Played a little bit inside linebacker from time to time. They're moving him around, taking him off the edge as well. So some of that usage, and you brought up the great point about the snap count. I expect his snap count, his percentage of snaps played, to come down as well. So I think all those things factor in, and that's part of the reason. Um, I also pulled Andrew Van Ginkel off the list. So since we both had him at number one there, wanted to call that out first. Now, on your list here, you also pulled Jared Verse off the list. So you want to talk a little bit about pulling Jared Verse off the list, because a lot of people are pretty high on Jared Verse.
Yeah, and I like Jared Verse. He had a fantastic rookie season, deservedly so. Won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Uh, but for this exercise, we have to pull off 13 people because of his youth, because of the amount of mouths to feed there with Turner, Fisk, Young. They drafted Josiah Stewart, I think, from Michigan in the third round, who's probably going to get some rotation. There's a lot of mouths to feed there. Their strength of schedule is not the greatest. They're kind of in that bottom third as far as playing opponents who gave up points to edge rushers. They have one of the hardest schedules in that regard. Also, it really came down to the sack numbers. And looking at the scoring system from last week, this week again, it's very heavy for the big plays, the sacks, stuff like that. Whereas the tackles aren't aren't scored as highly in this one. This isn't a tackle heavy scoring. So with him only getting 4.5 sacks throughout the whole year, I don't know how much more he's going to get next year or this year. His tackle numbers are solid. They're enough to keep him up there. Whether he can increase his sacks or not will determine if he slides into that top 24 again or if he does fall out. Uh, and his missed tackle rate was awful high. It was like 20.4, which is not good if you compare it to Malcolm Kuntz, 4.4 in 2023. Montez Sweat, 8.6. Maxx Crosby, 6.3%. So quite a bit of missed tackles there as well. These are all things I think he will figure out. But there are some issues there. A lot of mouths to feed, tough schedule. Those are reasons I pulled him out.
Very interesting. So um, he was one that thought about, but I left in. And to your point, he was number 9 in actually pass rush win rate per PFF. So now that didn't translate to maybe as many sacks as would have hopefully happened. But I'm also hopeful that his going into a second year, his tackle rate will improve, things along those lines. So, but that's why we have these discussions and debates and all. You brought up some very valid points and all, but this is one from year 1 to year 2. I think there'll be improvement, and particularly since he was a top 10 on pass rush win rate. But to your point, though, there are some things that's got to get cleaned up, and people do take for granted the strength of schedule. So I'm glad you did some of the research on that, Sean, because that makes a big difference because different teams and who you're playing and so forth. Now, granted, it's based on last year, and there are
Sure.
changes in offensive lines and so forth, but still, that makes a big difference when it comes to who we're starting each and every week. So I'm glad you brought that up. But so Jared Verse got you in terms of why you pulled him off. Okay.
All right, so I'm going right after you for the big dog here, Mr. Trent Jordan Watt, TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. You decided this perennial yearly defensive player of the year contender needs to be off this list. Please tell us why do you hate the Steelers, Ricky?
It's not that I hate the Steelers, but boy, like I talked about last week, I just, in general, I'm worried about them imploding. And this is another part of the imploding thing. So TJ Watt is going to his age 31 season. So that's number one.
Mhm.
And while he's played 17 games the last couple of years, part of that has been he's been playing banged up. And then the years before that, he wasn't playing the full 17 games. I think he played like 15 games 2 or 3 years in a row. Maybe there was a 10 gamer in there as well. So worried about the age, number one. Number two is contract dispute. Granted, it's been pretty quiet on the one hand, but don't expect him at OTAs. If this isn't solved by the beginning of training camp as well, we've seen when people hold out, even if they eventually sign before game one, their stats and their productivity and sometimes their health, they have nagging injuries that happen that impact their productivity. So all of that, um, plus this bad feeling about the Steelers. Once again, I just, I just have a this. This is and back to that age 31 thing. So not everybody can stay at a peak forever, and this is the year I'm predicting that T.J. Watt. comes down that peak. Enough to fall out of the top 24. And to your point, this was a tough exercise to find 13 names
Right.
that need to come off of this list. And as I was talking about earlier in the podcast, instead of thinking about all the positives, and TJ Watt's been good, for many years or whatever. But at some point, that cliff has to happen. We talk about the running back cliff that starts at 26 now. People saying 28 kind of thing, but whatever. But at some point, it happens. And for an edge rusher who's constantly getting double teamed and chipped and everything else, there's the wear and tear as well. So that's why I'm taking TJ Watt off the list.
All right. My train of thought was, hey, his guy wants a new contract. He's going to go win Defensive Player of the Year, lead the league in sacks. All will be well. Steelers will make the playoffs again, lose the first round again. All will be right in the world.
That may draft a quarterback again because they'll be at like spot 22 or something like that.
Yep. Miss again. Yep. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, but I can't wait to watch DK Metcalf get in a fight with somebody on the sidelines. It's going to happen.
Let's hope it's not a coach.
All right, another tough name on this list that you chose to take off the list, Brian Burns of the New York Giants.
This is the only one I regret taking off the list, actually.
Okay. I'll give you a bogey, or not a bogey. What do you call it in golf?
Mulligan?
Right. Mulligan, thank you. I'll give you a mulligan. If you want to, or you want to stick with Burns.
I'll stick with it.
Okay. All right.
Great player. All his pass rushing metrics look fantastic. He's consistent with his sacks. He's consistent with his tackles. I guess much to your point about having a bad feeling about Pittsburgh and just how that team's going to play out this year. I guess I have similar concerns with how the Giants will fare this year. I do see them kind of falling apart, and maybe Dable will fight for his job, and things just going crazy. They also spent, first round pick with Abdul Carter, who I don't think will necessarily eat into Brian Burns' reps. Although it is possible we could see a three-headed monster here. They did pick up Thibodeau's fifth-year option, which is kind of baffling to me. I wasn't expecting that. So maybe all these guys rotate around. We have Dexter Lawrence sitting there eating up tackles, so maybe those go down. Strength of schedule-wise, I don't think it was terrible.
In general, for the Giants team in general, they have a killer start. I remember their first 4 games are really tough. Dable might be sweating very heavily come week 5, to your point about the concerns about the Giants.
That is one of my biggest concerns there, which, maybe Westbrook is pulled, then Dart gets in, and they're on the field more than they would like to be and can't really, pin their ears back and get after the quarterback, as analysts like to say. So I do think that's some concern there that this team will be bad again, and maybe those sack opportunities will not be there. Other than that, I love Brian Burns. He is a really good player. But for splitting hairs with any kind of digging in deep and looking at some of these situations, I just felt like there was enough to have some concern there. He's been pretty healthy most of his career. That doesn't mean he won't get hurt this year. So those variables, but he's still in his prime. He's 26, 27, something like that. Just a lot of things that can go bad this year, I think, for the Giants. Just bad feeling. So I'm still in your thunder from the Steelers there, and I'm using that to justify taking Burns off here.
It's very fair. At the end of the day, we're creating narratives in terms of what can potentially happen and what we feel like strongly about what could happen or might not happen. Now, I don't know if the Steelers will have fights on the sidelines necessarily, but I just have a feeling this could be a bad year and there could be a ripple effect and things snowballing and so forth. So, and you feel that same way about the Giants. And now look, for our listening audience too, it would have been real easy if you and I would have said, let's just focus on the names near the bottom of the 20, around
Yeah,
2024. But
right.
we're purposely picking some of these tougher ones to have the dialogue and discussion with our audience once again to get everybody thinking because the numbers say 13 out of the 24. And Sean talked about there's only a few in the edge group that fell out of the top 24 because of injuries last year. So something's going to change.
Yeah,
Happens.
and it's it's not exact rocket science to figure out some of these. It could be contract years for some of these guys that shoot them up for this year, and then they go back into obscurity next year. We see that happen year after year for at least a
Namde
couple guys.
Matabuike.
Yeah, and they actually had a really good schedule last year for defensive tackles for opponents giving up points to defensive tackles. They were like top two. Again, they're near the top, but he got his bag, and it's hard to keep running with all that money in your pocket. I guess.
I guess it
I've
weighs
never
you
tried.
down.
Yeah, I've never tried, but it sounds like fun. All
unless I have
right.
a bunch of unless I have a bunch of pennies in mine,
Yeah,
as opposed to dollar bills.
I'm. Well, you better hold on to those while you can. I hear they're leaving soon, so
They are going out of circulation. That is correct. Um, Alrighty, I think I'm up next, aren't I?
you're up next. Let's go to another contract guy here, or a guy wanting a new contract. Fantastic season he had, Mr. Nick Benito of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah. So 6'3", 245 over a 10-game stretch had 10 sacks. So it's like Ricky, how in the heck can you leave him out? Once again, well, he was the second to last one of the 13 that I pulled off the list. So it wasn't like he was the first one to put off the list.
Sure.
But it just feels like that was such an outlier season for him. It just, um, I know he was a second round pick out of Oklahoma. I get it, but it felt like such an outlier season. And I think this year too, you're going to see Jonah Ellis mix in a little bit more. Probably even see Dondre Tillman, mix in a little bit more. Q Robinson, the rookie draft pick, will mix in a little bit more because I'm not convinced that the Broncos are going to re-sign Benito. And so I think he's going to get less playing time out of it. I think we would have heard something by now, even that there are talks or negotiations. I mean, there's been pin drops. And so that tends to tell me something too. And so once again, if he doesn't get the contract going into the season, is he's like going to be pissed because okay, they're going to franchise tag me. Um, am I not going to play as hard and just go somewhere else in the off season? There's also the possibility of Drew Sanders, who they're talking about playing him mostly on the inside, also from his experience in college, also getting a little bit run on the outside as well potentially. So this one I'm not feeling overly great with, other than it just feels like such an outlier year. There's his year two to the year three jump was just so off the charts. And there were a few of those fluke plays. We saw him on what was it, Sunday night or Monday night, Thursday night football. A couple of pick six and all, which obviously boosted his points as well. I'm just not buying that we're going to see the same 11 and a half, 12 sacks for the full year. So not the strongest of arguments, but not just my gut is not feeling great about him.
Again, we don't know how these contract situations are going to go. Is it a guy who's going to go out there and just play his heart out and get paid one way or the other for one team or another? Or is he going to just kind of sulk up and sit on the bench and do nothing? So, character, we don't know what that's going to look like. But yeah, I understand those concerns. I will say, going back to 23, when he was put into a more in a majority of the playing snaps there, he really took off and had similar numbers like he did this year as far as the sacks and all that. So that gives me a little less concern that it was flukish. I guess like he can produce at a higher rate. Um, but then you got to factor in last year he also had a couple touchdowns on those big plays, and to predict a big play to happen and score touchdowns, that's hard to do as well. So without knowing for sure he can get those sacks, you can't count on those big plays either.
Right.
Totally get it.
All righty. So, boy, I had a little blip there. of electricity, like for like 10 seconds, like 2 seconds, and then kind of knock things out of kilter. But luckily, I'm back. So I missed half of your talk, but it sounded great.
I did amazing. That's all you need to know. I backed you up.
Perfect. All righty. So speaking of contracts and someone who got paid this year, Greg Russo, but yet you have him on the list of folks that are coming off the top 24 list this year.
Yeah, he was one of my last probably 3 or 4 guys I cut. That's not to say he's not a solid player. He's just not. He's not a double-digit sack guy yet. Career high has been 8, and he's hit that twice. Of course, the tackles are pretty good. But Joey Bosa's in town now. AJ Epinesa is still there. Michael Hoyt will be in there once he comes back from suspension. Ed Oliver is there in the middle. I feel like and the Bills have for years have been rotating their guys quite a bit. It has steadied out a little more where Russo is probably the main guy, but I just find him a little unspectacular compared to some of these other guys. Some of these other guys have, I guess, the higher ceiling, where he has the higher floor, which would be just enough to kind of kick him out on some of these lists. So if he doesn't keep a high tackle floor and add those 8 sacks, if he drops down to 6 sacks, that's enough to kick him out of the top 24. And I just don't see the consistency for him to hit 10 sacks yet, 12 sacks, to really propel himself up there as a consistent guy near the top. So
Yeah, and Buffalo has been notorious for rotating their linemen. Um, this past year, not so much because they didn't have the depth.
right,
Now, to your point, they added Hoyt. Um, they added. They also added Landon Jackson in the third round out of Arkansas. So even though Russo's snap count went up last year, which helped contribute to some of his stats, there's a possibility that his snap count comes back down to where they'd like him to play a little bit less and be more efficient on the plays that he is in there. So that there is that risk of overall snap count impacting total stats as a result. So just one other food for thought for our listening audience on that one.
yeah, and 3 of his sacks came in that first game, and then he was kind of solid there for a while. So inconsistency on the sacks, where a guy like Benito went like 7, 8 weeks with a sack each week or half a sack, and so sometimes
In over 10 weeks, yep.
those consistent scores mean a lot more than that one spike week. So that's another thing to look at. Uh, let's look at your last guy here. I found this interesting. Danielle Hunter.
So Daniil Hunter is the roughly the same age as TJ Watt. He's going into his age 31 season.
Mm-hmm.
And so my age theories from TJ Watt also apply to Daniil Hunter. And when I start thinking about it, these guys are playing professional football, and now they're about exactly half my age. um, so starting wondering, maybe if they're half my age, should they still be playing? No, but once again, and look, I'll be the first to admit, there's 3 straight years of playing 17 straight games. He is a former LSU Tiger. Okay, so and I've got my LSU Tiger bias, but even with that, that age 31, I just think there's a little bit of a cliff here. I think that means risk of injuries, and I think that risk of production impacts. And I'm gonna place a bet here, and it's going on record, so people can call me on it later on. That the Texans are going to wish at the end of this year that they had re-signed Jonathan Grenard as opposed to letting him go to the Vikings, as opposed to have signed Hunter in free agency last year. Basically, both teams traded.
Uh,
Now, neither one of us took Grenard out of the top 24. By the way,
that's there's for different reasons. I will say Houston has a difficult schedule coming up. Um, and Will Anderson being the younger guy, maybe he's a little faster back there. there was a big drop in Hunter's tackles also, from a guy that was getting 60, 70, even 80 tackles. He dropped down to like 45, 46, I want to say. So that's a big chunk of points. King's Classic or regular tackle heavy scoring it, that matters a lot. That's one thing that kept him up there near the elite guys all these years was his abundance of tackles there. So yeah, for that decline, harder schedule, age, I get it. I consider taking him off as well, but with a tandem that him and Anderson have, and just just the way that D'Amico Ryan's coaches, being a former player and all, I feel like he's going to get at least one more good year out of him.
Okay, interesting. Well, the tackles, and I forgot to mention that I skipped over that in my notes. That was another reason that his decrease in tackles was another reason I took him off the list as
I
well.
I considered him just on that alone, just because if you have a good tackle floor like he has in the past, for that to cut down nearly in half, being his first year with a new team, that could be a scheme indication that he's just not going to produce those high tackles anymore, and that he will be more sack dependent. So yeah, I consider taking Hunter off too, but out of loyalty, I left him on there for LSU. Ricky can't say the same.
I cannot say the same for my loyalty, and you're not even an LSU guy.
I know, right?
Sitting in Tennessee somewhere. All right. So the last thing, so before we go to who we think will move into the list, you and I had different takes on the Jaguars edge players. I took Travon Walker off the list. You took Josh Hines Allen off the list. Now, Walker outscored Hines Allen this past year. So, what was interesting in PFF, now, look, different people I know have different takes on PFF, but I'm going to give a shout out because I do use their stats regularly as part of some of the analysis that I do here. They had Travon Walker with 79 pass rush ranking, whereas Josh Hines Allen was at number 10, which I thought was very interesting. So, does that mean Walker lucked in more sacks? The other thing that in 2 games, Walker had 10.5 sacks. Half of those, 5 of them came in 2 games. So the other 5.5 came in the remainder of the games. So back to spike weeks versus consistency. That's why I took Travon Walker off instead of Hines Allen. Your thoughts on why you took off Hines Allen instead?
So the big thing for Walker for me was he has shown he's gotten 10 sacks 2 years straight. His tackle numbers have improved each year, not drastically, but they are going up. He's shown to be very durable. Josh Hines Allen, on the other hand, had a big dip last year, both in his tackles, and his sack average seems to hang around 7 or 8. He had the big jump the year before at 17, I think. So
Which I believe was a contract year, by the way.
contract year. So that's you'll see some of the guys on my list for the next part is because of contract years. So I do see with him being on that side, teams are more likely to double team Hines Allen and give more opportunities to Travon Walker. So I see him as being the beneficiary of the double teams on the opposite end, and the schedule is actually good for both of them. To start out with, on paper, they both look like they could have good seasons. I just feel Travon Walker, being the younger, faster guy, will get some more of those sacks.
All right. 2 really good arguments for people to consider there. Okay, so I'm going to pick one more and let you pick one more off the list, and we'll be really quick on it. Will McDonald, I did not take off the list. He's at number 22. Once again, showed improved explosiveness, and well, he was always explosive, but turning that explosiveness into pass rush success this past year. I expect that to continue this year. And the thing that which hurt McDonald the first 2 years has been the lack of strength and lack of weight. And we'll talk about that with someone on my list coming up when we talk about who will come into the top 24. But part of why I decided to leave him in is some recent information about him having put on 15 pounds of muscle without losing any of the speed. And I just think that's going to make a difference to allow him to be on the field for more snaps and to have more success in the stay in the top 24 and actually climb up this list a little bit. So, who's one more from your list that you want to talk about? And then we'll move on to the next section.
Harold Landry, I kept on there mostly because of his familiarity with the system and Mike Vrabel. The big beefy guys he's got playing up front this year. Christian Barmore is clear to play; he's wide open to go. Bill Williams is coming over to help eat up some blockers as well. Landry is a guy who consistently gets 70 tackles. Add in 9 to 12 sacks, I think is very doable, which would put him right here, right about where he's at now, at the bottom of the top 12. I see it being very easily to duplicate and for him to hang in there. I'm not scared of the Patriots anymore.
Interesting. And he's only going into his age 29 season. And since the torn ACL in 2022, he has played 17 games both years. So a very fair call out.
I've watched him here for years in Tennessee. He was actually one of my favorite players to watch. He does kind of, he's not strictly an edge rusher. He does drop into coverage. He's not scared to run up, make a tackle. So he is more of a kind of a stand up outside linebacker kind of guy. And he's a lot of fun to watch if you get time to check out some of his games there.
All righty. So no fear for Harold Landry changing teams because of the Vrabel familiarity, which is a great call out. All righty. So then we're going to move into who we think is going to move into the top 24. We don't have nearly as much agreement as we had last week on the interior defensive lineman and slash defensive tackles that we did last week. But before we do that, quick shout out for IDPplus.com. IDP Plus has great content, great tools. You know, one of these, one of our future shows, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the tools, but showing how individual defensive players do against certain teams. You know, there's a lot of just powerful tools out there. It's there for offense as well, but encourage you to check that out. The rankings, the Discord channel, you name it, kind of thing. So lots of great stuff there. So check out idpplus.com and get more of this fantastic content. All righty. We will now move into our next section, which is the people moving into the top 24. And so, for those that might be watching, just to clarify, there are 5 people in green who Sean and I agreed would move into the top 24. Then the others in blue are the ones that Sean feels like will move into the top 24. And the ones that are in purple are the ones that I feel will move into the top 24. So that is the layout on the slide. And Aiden Hutchinson is at the top of our list. And by the way, we did these completely independent, and then we bring our list together and compare at that point. So there's no biases from either one of us either way, as a side note. But Aiden Hutchinson, who, back to the Travon Walker discussion, I still wonder if the Jacksonville Jaguars regret taking Walker over Hutchinson, but I digress. But we both feel like he'll move to the top 24. It feels like a no-brainer there. So I don't even think we need to talk about him. But I would like you to talk about someone for the New York Jets. And speaking of contract years that we're just talking about, you have Jermaine Johnson on your list as someone you think will move to the top 24.
Absolutely. Jermaine Johnson coming back from injury. When comparing him to, Will McDonald came across more sack or bust for me. His tackle numbers were not there. Where I do believe Johnson has a high enough tackle floor where maybe 8 to 10 sacks will get him into this top 24, and I think he is very capable of doing so. That's a pretty solid line the Jets still have, even without. They still have a defensive coach, actually, Aaron Glenn. I don't know how much he pays attention to the defensive line, but Johnson's still a young guy coming off the injury. I think he'll be fine. He'll be ready to go, ready to earn a new contract. I'm expecting big things out of him.
So I actually consider Jermaine Johnson. I was trying to trade for Jermaine Johnson right around the time he tore his Achilles last year.
Mm.
And it's the Achilles that kept me from putting him on the list this year. If this were going into 2026, I would undoubtedly have him on my list unless he sustains another injury. But that Achilles is so hard to come back from, particularly in year one. That is the reason I left him off. It's also the reason Jalen Phillips isn't on my list, and he's not on your list either. Now,
I
go
wanted to
ahead.
put him. I wanted to put Jalen Phillips on here, both as a IDP fan and a Dolphins fan. But with the multiple injuries to the same leg, ACL and Achilles are both on the same leg. He
Right.
hasn't played more than 6 games, I think, last 2 seasons. Like he's a what if for me at this point.
Exactly. So Phillips is another one. When we're doing this exercise next year for 2026, he
Hmm.
might be both on our list. But I just worry that Achilles injury just concerns the heck out of me. And on Phillips' case, you brought up the knee as well. Would just complicate things further. So I do love Jermaine Johnson, the player. I just worry if it's 1 year away. But we'll see on that one who might be right on that one.
Sure, like I said, it's the tackle floor where Will McDonald didn't have a lot of tackles to go with his sacks. Where I think Johnson, even if he's not up to speed rushing the passer, I think he'll be able to get enough tackles to kind of keep him afloat until he's comfortable enough. Assuming that everything goes great surgery wise, then the sacks take off. We're right back where we need to be. Um, who do I want to go with here? Let's go. Let's go down to Tampa. We both had a guy from Tampa on here. I went with Hassan Reddick, looking for that bounce back year to kind of make amends to all of us for disappointing us last year in that weird situation with the Jets. And you went with his young counterpart, Mr. Yaya Diaby.
Young is the first thing, okay? So versus Hassan, and I purposely on the list for those that are watching, when I got your names and all, I kind of moved to try and put some comparison points. And Reddick and Diaby both being in Tampa Bay, that's why I have them on the same line here on line 7 here. And so Yaya Diaby started playing football late in life, okay, and so he's a little bit behind the learning curve. And if you look at his rookie year at age 24. He only started 7 of the 17 games that came up with 7.5 sacks, 38 combined tackles. Move forward, he started all 17 games in 2024. Did I say 2023? Well, his first year was 23. Sorry if I messed it up. 2024, last year, year two, his sacks were down from 7.5 to 4.5. But according to PFF, he was number 19 in terms of pass rush win rate. Gosh, that's hard to say.
Yeah,
And
I commend
and
you
I
for
expect
trying.
him, yeah, and I expect him to continue. On top of that, his combined tackles jumped up from 38 in his rookie year to 54, and while his sacks are down, his quarterback hits went up from 8 to 20. The fact that he's doing, the fact that he's still learning, still improving, and he'll have someone like Hassan Reddick to continue to learn from. On top of that, going into year three, I expect that bump up. Now I hate it because I'm also a Saints fan. Um, but I just expect that positive trend on tackles to continue, the education, and I think he'll close out more. On, I think he'll close out on sacks as well, and win rate and so forth. And by the way, Yaya is just so freaking fun to say, and so that is the final reason for having Yaya Diaby on this list.
I don't hate it. I really considered putting him on there too, especially when you got Big Vita Vea smashing up the middle, running quarterbacks to the outside, right into his grasp. Uh, yeah, just for fun, I went with the comeback story of Riddick over Diaby. But yeah, I'm with you. I think he does have a really good season.
Well, since you talked a little bit, why don't you talk a little bit more about Reddick? I know that wasn't on our plan, but why don't you talk a little bit more about Reddick? About you're just feeling really good about last year was just an anomaly, and you think he'll bounce back and all because you have a full training camp and everything else.
Yeah, that's my hope here. It was just kind of a wasted year for him. Just a whole weird situation. He wanting, I guess, the big payday and didn't get it. But I mean, he's shown in the past, no matter what team he was on, he could produce the sacks, whether it be Carolina or what Arizona, Philly, just everywhere he's been. He's been that guy to get the sacks to be on this list. And if not for whatever happened last year with the holdout, the contract, and just not being in shape is what it looked like to me when he did come in. Maybe it was a big eye opener for him. I want to see him come out, really give it his all, get that big payday, and then he can go back to doing nothing.
Now, I think I've let people know that I'm an ageist in terms of worrying about players' ages and the fall off cliff and when that might be for edges and so forth. He is going into year 31 or age 31, his age 31 here in 2025. So that was one of the reasons too that I leaned towards Diaby more than Reddick.
Yeah, I don't hate
But
that. But he didn't play much last year, so we take that away. He's still 30 in body.
fair enough. He did not have the wear and tear this year that he did last year. Okay, so well, let's continue with you, picking on you here for a second, and DJ Wanham, who for people that have listened to my IDP Advice Plus show during the season, heard me not exactly being extremely positive about Wanham, even though he was getting some productivity when he finally came back from injury. Talk about why you have Wanham on this list, Sean.
Yeah, nobody likes Wanham. Nobody wants Wanham, but we can't get enough of him right now. He's productive.
We want him some. We want
Yeah,
him some Wanham. First, is
we want him less, but he won't go away. Yeah, he's he missed the first 9 games last year with I believe a quadricep injury, and came in, got four sacks, 37 tackles. Not great numbers, but that was on 8 games. So if he kept that production, you double that and puts him right there where he was the year before in Minnesota. So that's pretty consistent for me to get those tackle numbers and a decent amount of sacks to get in the top 24. Go along with Carolina having a pretty favorable schedule as well. And looking at the guys he's got to play just in the division, it's not like Baker Mayfield wasn't getting hit last year. So there's points to be made there. Doesn't matter who the Saints roll out, they're going to get hit. Sorry,
yeah.
Ricky, but
You,
I'm not
you got
predicting a good year for them.
you got. I don't blame you. My narrative is the same way for the Saints. So, and for many other people have the same narrative, by the way. Um, so you have in that division, to your point, rookie. Well, basically a rookie quarterback in Penix, who only started a couple of games late last year. You'll have a Rattler or a Tyler Shuck. It's weird that it's pronounced Shuck
Yeah,
based on how
I don't
it's
like it
spelled.
either. I don't like
Yeah,
it.
Bryce Young, who you know was the last half of the year fluke. Oh
Mm-hmm.
no, that's the same team. My bad. And then you have Baker. You're right. Uh, so anyway, there's some opportunities for some big games there. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, them being one of the worst teams in the league worked in their favor for a schedule for the edge rushers. Derek Brown's coming back. Ashawn Robinson's going to be there as well. There's not much competition on the other side. Uh, as far as sacks go, we get Pat Jones coming over from Minnesota as well. Rookie Nick Scarton.
Yeah. And so that was the last thing I was going to ask you on Wanham. No concerns about. Now, granted, they have Patrick Jones and they have um, who they signed this year from Minnesota as well, just like Wanham came over from Minnesota, but they drafted Nick Scorton. They drafted Princely Umanamilian
Mm-hmm.
out of Ole Miss. No concerns about those guys taking his snaps here in year one for those two rookies.
Not right away. We're not expecting Carolina to be just completely, or I'm not expecting them to be completely awful here. I do see them being competitive this year and being able to hold enough of a lead to let these guys get some sacks and not just have to rely on Derek Brown to get 100 tackles. I do see, like I said, with the youth of the quarterbacks in that division, there's going to be plenty of sack opportunities just in those 6 games, not counting the rest of the schedule. So yeah, I like his upside here.
All right. All right. Well, let's move on in the interest of time.
Sure. All right. For you, let's go back to New England. I liked Harold Landry. You did not. You think it's the Keon White show. Let's hear a little more about that.
I do think it's the Keon White show, and Keon White is quite the athletic freak. Um, and so I still remember watching the NFL draft and wanting the Saints to take Keon White. And who did they take instead? Instead of taking Keon White out of Georgia Tech, they took Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame.
Worked out
So they
real
went
well.
for the college production over the athletic freakness and the opportunities that he had, that I saw, and that many others saw, including the Patriots. And so after his rookie year and kind of coming up the learning curve and bouncing between and he has continued to bounce between that defensive tackle, defensive end kind of role. But this year in my fantasy league, he is listed as a defensive end. So once again, we talked about positions last week and all. If you checked that out on the show last week, if you missed it, but different sites are playing these people differently, or some of these players in different positions. And White is one of those that's listed as defensive end. With Vrabel coming over, with a competent defensive staff coming over, I feel like there's Jeffrey Simmons kind of potential between him and Barmore. We talked about how much we like Barmore last week, and I think Keon White falls in that same bucket. And once again, he was someone else. I can't remember if he started late if it was that he started late or he switched positions late in his career. I think it was that he switched positions. So he hasn't been playing on the line that long. And in his first year, he had 26 combined tackles and 5 quarterback hits. In year two, he went up to 56 combined tackles with 16 quarterback hits. The sacks went up from only 1 to 5, and 4 of those 5, being honest, came in the first two games of the year. I just think that with that athletic capability, with him continuing to learn the defensive line, with all the surroundings of him, including the Landrys of the world and the Barmores, so forth, I think this is going to be another third-year breakout guy. And Keon White for the Patriots, I see him moving this top 24, and he was number 20 in terms of pass rush win rate this past year. So that's my Keon White argument.
I don't hate it a bit. I didn't include him because I didn't know he was listed as a defensive end on the MFL before I turned my list in. So
Yeah, and I saw that at the last minute too. So once again, check your position of list, folks. Can make a big difference. Particularly, let's say you had White high on the defensive tackle list. Maybe you're still going to pick him, but he's a little bit lower because he's a defensive end relative to some of the other defensive ends and so forth. All righty. So now let us go back to you and let us talk about Carl Granderson.
I liked Carl last year after the big year in 23 where he had 8.5 sacks, 78 tackles. I was looking for him to hit double digits sacks. That was not the case. A little bit of a letdown last year. 61 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. It's all there, I think, for him if he can just hit the increase his sack numbers. I think his tackle floor keeps him right there outside of the 24. So you add a couple more sacks, and he's right there on this list. His consistency since taking over, he's going to have Chase Young on the opposite side. Cameron Jordan's going to play a little more inside. Colin Saunders, like all those guys, it's a fun defensive line with Chase Young being able to take some of that pressure off of him on the opposite side. I do think he hits double-digit sacks this year and keeps a high tackle floor.
I agree with you. I think the change in the whole New Orleans Saints coaching staff, I think bringing Brandon Staley in as a defensive coordinator, not as a head coach, but as a
Mm.
defensive coordinator who's a bright mind. They're moving to that 3-4. And I have both Granderson and Chase Young on my list as jumping to the top 24.
I considered Young as well. He's a little streaky at times, boomer bust. I do think
And,
that both benefit. I'm a little worried that they get behind too much, and the sack opportunities will not be there. And with Granderson's tackle floor being so much higher, that's kind of where took Young out of that.
I agree with you. I would rank Granderson if we were ranking them 1 through 24, and just to make sure people know this isn't necessarily the rank order that we have them on the list, but this is just who we see moving into the top 24, just to make sure that's clear. But I think Chase Young is one that sneaks in the top 24. I think even though he just got paid, and we talked about people who just got paid and so forth, I think I think both of these Saints guys, even with the risk of them being behind and all, I just think both of them have the opportunities and so forth, okay, to make it in there. I think a lot of people are going to disagree with my Chase Young take.
I don't hate it. I just didn't pull the trigger to put him in there. But yeah, so we both took out Alex Van Ginkel there at the beginning of this, and you were the only one to put Dallas Turner into his spot. Let's hear a little more on that.
Yep. So Van Ginkel, as you talked about, we both took him out now, and they traded up for Dallas Turner. They spent a lot of money on him. I think Van Ginkel gets moved around a lot more. I think Turner does something that I talked about with Will McDonald. Turner will put on more weight, more mass. I used to joke in some of the shows I was doing last season about him being light in the pants. He being Dallas Turner, and I think he will bulk up, add the strength to go along with the speed that he has. And with see Van Ginkel playing, like I said, more positions, I think Turner gets more opportunity. I think Turner sneaks into the top 24, not top 8 or top 10, but I think he sneaks in there. And with his speed and ability to chase things down, I think it helps him anymore. And then you throw in, you know, some of the work they did at defensive tackle with adding Javon Hargrave, adding Jonathan Allen. I just think it's going to be who do they double teaming on. We talked very highly of the other two defensive tackles for Vikings last week in terms of top 24, and I just think there's some opportunities here for Mr. Turner as well. So I think Turner sneaks into the top 24 as Van Ginkel falls out of the top 24. So does Van Ginkel become one of the ones that's injured? That is a high possibility. I don't know. My gut. It's my gut.
I don't know about injury. I'm wondering if we can get three guys with 10 sacks here on the same team. Also a possibility. I am a little concerned about some of these guys eating into each other on the sacks.
That's
Because
a
we,
very fair. That's a very fair call out.
yeah, that's. I do feel Greener is the safest of the bunch, just with the way
I,
he's played.
I
But
do agree. I do with you. I do agree with you on that. And we both left him in the top 24.
yeah, but yeah, good stuff, man. It's very possible. Like I said, if he has bulked up, the opportunity should be there.
Okay. All right. Let me give you the opportunity to pick one more from your list. So, who's the one more on the list you want to give a shout out to that we haven't talked about so far?
Uh oh boy. Let's go with Malcolm Kuntz. He's
Okay.
probably he was one of my first to add to this list behind Hutchinson and Rashawn Gary. Just because I really like the way he ended 23 when he took over the majority of defensive snaps there uh, with him and Wilson, I believe it was. Uh, Man, he just had so many good games there. He looked the part. He looked competent out there, playing across from Maxx Crosby. Christian Wilkins was just signed, and then boom, injured, missed all last year. He's had a full year to get healthy. Uh, his missed tackle rate was fantastic. And when you've got that much help on the defensive line, Adam Butler there in the middle as well, teams are going to be able to double team everybody. He's going to be the free guy. He's playing for a contract. I'm expecting a big year out of him.
My only concern, is coming back from the injury, but everything else you said about him in terms of, I love the way he finished 2023. To your point, assuming Wilkins is healthy, Crosby on the other side, etc., I think that can create some opportunities for him as well. And right now, there's no indication that Tyree Wilson, the former top 6 pick, is going to would would step into the role. In fact, Caleb Chason and Charles Snowden were playing ahead of Tyree Wilson for a lot of the last half of the year.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this is Kuntz's job, and assuming he can come back from that knee fully healthy, it's hard to argue your point. And if I were doing this in hindsight, I probably might put in Kuntz over Chase Young onto this list.
Big endorsement. Okay. Big endorsement.
Yeah, exactly right.
Anybody else you want to give a little extra attention to?
I'm going to call out, because I've been so hard on the Steelers, I'm going to actually call out Alex Highsmith. Now, if Alex Highsmith can stay healthy, his Highsmith, in terms of his number 7 in terms of PFF win rate, and for pass rushing, and pass rush stats are really important, but he's also a hustling tackling machine, does create forced fumbles from time to time. And I know I've trashed the Steelers quite a bit on a lot of these players, but this is the year I think Highsmith becomes the number 1 edge over Watt. And then you actually see a lot more of Herbig and Jack Sawyer instead of Watt on the other side. So that's Ricky's prediction. And so quick shout out for Alex Highsmith. And it might be on the bold side, but it'll be interesting to see a year from now what happens.
Yeah, if he can stay healthy, we've seen that tandem in the past really wreak havoc. Yeah, both these guys stay healthy, Watt and Highsmith. Even though Watt played all last year, I think the last 3 or 4 games was a thumb injury and ankle sprain or something like that. So we didn't get a lot out of him, especially at our fantasy playoffs. So yeah, if we can keep these elite guys to give us the points when it matters most, that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. All righty. Well, look, before we do a preview of our next show, and we do a quick preview on linebackers, just one more shout out for the Fantasy Football Expo at thefantasyfootballexpo.com, August 8th through 10th in Canton, Ohio. Great time. Get to go and tour the Hall of Fame way there. Get to meet so many people in the industry. Some of the top names that you see on SiriusXM, some of the top names you see on Twitter, or at Yahoo, or ESPN, etc. So, well, it's not RotoWorld, but NBC Sports Edge. I've seen all those folks in the past at the expo, and I'll be there. And unfortunately, Sean can't make it because of family reasons, but I'd love to meet many of you all there as well. Hope you come and join everybody. Go to fantasyfootballexpo.com and check out if you like to play poker, if you like to play cornhole. We have all kind of tournaments along those lines. A lot of fun. Come on out and check it out, folks.
If you're a Steelers fan, find Ricky. Tell him.
Yes. Okay. That's a high problem. All right. With that, let's quickly just do a peek at the linebackers. And if we think that taking out the edge players were tough, linebackers won't be so easy either. Although I'm beginning to think the edge might be the toughest one to figure out who's going to pull out, who we're going to pull off the list. Linebackers might not be as hard as edge. What do you think?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few right now that I could pull off, no problems. This looks very doable, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, what it'll be real interesting to see is who move into the top 24 as we take some of these names out. You have names like Kobe Dean, who will probably start on the injured list. There's always, there's a chance he'll be ready for the start of the year. I know he's going to be getting on pup, folks.
If he plays at all.
Yeah, exactly. If you have Eric Kendricks, who isn't even on the team yet, or Kaiser White not on the team yet. So some of those will come off pretty easily. But it's interesting when you see folks like Jack Campbell, 23, and Ernest Jones, 24, in the scoring system. So real interesting to see where this goes next week. We encourage you guys to join us and see who we take off this list. Because, the first, 6, 7, 8 might be easy, but getting the last 5 off might be a little bit harder than Sean and I are letting on, not to mention who's going to join the list. So join us for our show next week where we'll talk about that some more. Okay? So, Sean, any closing comments on the show today about edges in terms of final wrap-up thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, this was a really tough exercise, and I would actually encourage everyone else that really wants to dig deep on their own to look at these lists on here and just see what you would do as far as removing 13 players and replacing them with 13 others. It really gives you some perspective on what's really going on with some of these teams and looking for some kind of pattern, to maybe move forward in fantasy here. But yeah, it's been a great exercise. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd add is it forces you to really think through your narratives and what do you really believe is going to happen, and then to ascertain what you really believe is going to happen, you go look at strength of schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You as an example, you go back and look at tackles versus sacks and what their trends would be. You go back and look at their ages and so forth, and use some of that to create the narratives of what will really happen, as opposed to I just feel like. You use the numbers and use some of the history and trends to kind of help you formulate that.
Yeah, or try to dig a little deeper as far as I just feel that. Why do you feel that? Is it? There's got to be a little more to it. Sometimes our guts are right, but I can't pull off 13 guys just because I feel like.
Exactly right. That is well put. Um, all righty then. So with that, as a reminder, we will do the linebackers next week, and we'll continue on with this. We'll do cornerback, safeties, and then we'll move to the offense as well. And if you like the show, please give us a thumbs up on our YouTube page, folks. If you have comments or questions or suggestions or your thoughts about the top 24s, go ahead and put them on the YouTube channel. Sean and I will be monitoring it, and we'll try and respond to particularly where you have questions to get to see how we can help you all out there. Give me a follow at RickyRod66. Give Sean a follow at Sean8386 on X as well. Don't forget, you can always catch the replays of the IDP Plus Advice shows on the IDP Plus YouTube channel, along with many other great shows from the IDP Plus staff. With that, we'll see you in about another week or so. On behalf of Sean Teague, this is Ricky Roderick wishing you, your family, and your friends great health and happiness. Be kind and good to one another, and we're out of here, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.